mean, you do you. If you want to push it, push it. If you don't want to push it, don't push it.
I should never have put my finger there, though.
Push it. Push it real good. No? Okay. Gee.
That went south real quick. No pun intended.
No. That's what I get for pushing it.
And then they went, okay, that's enough.
Are you my daddy?
That was wrong in so many different ways.
It was.
We want to welcome everyone that hasn't seen that preamble to our whatnot.
Yeah,
We want to welcome.
the ones who haven't left yet.
Uh, I don't know why this went that way. In any event, welcome back to the Trampled Under. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay out in the West Coast and Eloy Escojedo here on the East Coast. Two dudes from two different sides of the continent with different backgrounds discussing life, the universe, and everything. What's going on, dude?
And a bunch of stuff in between. Man, I'm just one day older and deeper in debt. No, actually, no debt. I'm good on that score. I just plugging along, just making my way through. People in the middle of the country are kind of getting beat up. The weather's been pretty crummy. I guess folks in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana are getting kind of beat up right now with the weather.
I've been seeing clips of that, but it's so horrendous that I've tried to. It's just inconceivable.
Mhm.
It really is inconceivable.
Well, we've talked about that before. You can run, but you can't hide because they've got tornadoes in the middle of the country. We got fires and earthquakes out here, and you've got hurricanes and occasional tornadoes there. So you can run, but you can't hide. Nature's gonna win, and that's all there is to it. So, but
Did you hear about those people that decided on the most perfect location next to a mountain called Vesuvius?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, and it's funny. There was an earthquake there before the volcano blew, and they had evacuated the city, and they were just getting ready to start coming back, and some people were back, and suddenly the volcano blew. And so otherwise the town would have been a lot more heavily populated than it was. So most of the people of what's the name of the town? Not Herculaneum. What's the other town?
Herculaneum and Pompeii.
Pompeii. I couldn't think of the word Pompeii to save my life. Don't get old. It's not for kids. I'm telling you.
You know what the saddest part about my thinking of what you're talking about right now?
What's that?
Or not saddest, but like the irony is that once you started getting into it, actually I keyed you in when I said, hey, there's a whole town in somewhere in Italy. But either way, I said that just off the cuff. But when you started to get into the detail, my mind went, I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows.
Mr. Buffett, yes.
But here's the problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's showing my bookends. Or it's not my only, but you get the point. Like
I do.
My mind is saying, hey, how about that Jimmy Buffett song? So what does that say about the human when you're talking about something complicated where people but the mind triggers into a freaking Jimmy Buffett song from the 1970s or whatever.
See, we're more alike than you know, because this is totally, absolutely way from out in left field, okay? Absolutely nothing like what I wanted to talk about. But it's one of those little serendipitous things in that you immediately related it to a Jimmy Buffett song. I do that every damn day. Somebody will say something. One of my favorites is he's got a song called Gravity Storm. And it's kind of a little play. You ever been knocked off a bar stool? Well, you got caught in a gravity storm. That kind of thing. I fall out of a tree and I hit the ground. Yep. You got caught in a localized gravity storm. I use phrases like that from Jimmy Buffett songs all the time.
You
You
see,
know,
I
the
I I tried to amend my carnivorous habit,
uh-huh.
but
You make it nearly 70 days. you know, it just works. I mean, just the weirdest line, the weather is here, wish you were beautiful. I mean, if the
you
phone
can
doesn't ring, it's me.
if they I hate to, but I have to say it because we're always on repeat anyhow. Human beings are.
Hmm.
If the big one struck
Hmm.
and everything was covered in ash and brimstone, blah blah blah, and then some further civilization, maybe 1,000 years from now,
Hmm.
comes exploring, and they start picking apart the things that were conserved in said
Hmm.
hail of whatnot, um, and they piece stuff together. Imagine whatever didn't crumble away, and they only had that left. Imagine if there's just a Pink Floyd album, a Jimmy Buffett cassette, and like some random sundry things. And then you have these people in a lab sitting there, and they have to build a whole civilization out of an album, this and a that. And imagine the weird. I mean, oh, this must have been the religious symbol.
Hmm. Well,
Thinking of
yeah.
the, you
Carry it a
know,
little further. They find GI Joes and an Iron Man poster. Wow, these guys had that. They were really advanced.
these were their deities.
Yeah. Never mind, it was all fiction.
Or they find an 18 poster, and
Hmm.
they said, ah, this must have been their highest levels of council.
Hmm.
These must have been their kings.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
look at all the necklaces he's wearing. That's got to be religious, and that haircut, you know. Then, of course, you would have followers and devotees walking around, pronouncing or proclaiming the sacred chant, "I pity the fool, I pity the fool." You know.
I mean, it's sort of that sort of thing pops into mind because there's so much more to the ins and outs. Then comes some sort of savage thing that buries everything
Hmm.
in muck and mud and whatnot, and then it comes to be that people down the line are exploring the freaking rubbish that left behind
Hmm.
by a society to
Yeah,
piece together what the heck happened. I mean, I think it's, yeah. If you
yeah.
think of it in terms of that, there's nobody that can tell our story partially
No,
as best as we can here now today as we live it.
well, but that story is going to end right around, say, 1994, 1995, when the internet started getting went public, and then from about I'll give it 1998. I'll give it till 1998. After that, everything went digital. So without electricity, there's no record.
I mean,
So,
it's recorded in the discs in the
but
hard.
without electricity, there's no record. You got to have something to play those discs. So they got to reverse engineer something to be able to play that disc.
They'd have to reinvent drawing data from
Hmm.
discs.
Yeah. Now,
There's a that I have to
before
tell you,
that, there were books and archives and things like that. Since I'll give it, like I said, 1998, but ever since then, we just don't archive much.
and a lot
It's
of it
all
is in
digital.
a lot of it is in the cloud. So
Yeah.
even worse, because if you have a hard drive, then maybe there's a chance that they won't use it for like a clobbering tool. But in any event, I have to tell you this in terms of this sort of thing.
Hmm.
There's a guy that's, I believe, just follow me, that the gist of it
Okay.
is more or less down that road, but the details I may be getting kind of, because it's not like I invested a whole lot looking at it,
Hmm.
but it's worth this little detail. There's a guy that for years now has been putting out like documentaries and books over lost, mysterious civilizations of the past.
Yeah.
And the theme And I can really let me just amend or add a little appendices in between.
Okay.
Um, due to my current interests, I've been able to see certain amounts of work that goes into, I don't know, if you find a freaking statue buried in the sands of whatnot,
Hmm.
they pull the statue, they measure where they map where it was, they start to investigate the item itself, they collect, I mean, it's a whole series of things that's very um they look for all the different clues and they document it. So
Right.
it's not like they're just coming around, they stumble on some sort of old statue and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, Medusa, let's move forward, folks." No,
Hmm.
they're like really working at the composition of the material. One
Hmm.
group is working on this, they're trying to figure it out. They're really invested in these things.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that their ultimate outcome is like, "Hey, and this is the whole story of the civilization." But what it
Right.
does mean is that
They have clues.
as far well my point yes, but my point is that as far as they can have it, the key fragments of data that they pull from something
Hmm.
is there for other people to evaluate um at the same time.
Right.
And within that, so in other words, what I'm saying is that this whole thing of science, yes, there's people that play favorites and this and that, but the data
Hmm.
and the ability for other people to parse through it and whatnot, that's some heavy duty stuff. And it's not well anyways, that's my appendices. Going back to this one guy, he went on Joe Rogan and he's done a few like a Netflix
Hmm.
series and whatnot. And it's well, ancient civilizations, they don't want you to know. They're hiding something from us. And how could this advanced tech, and we've touched on this, but he plays on the lowest common denominator
Hmm.
of thinking, because everybody, I like that. I love it. Like if the lizard people, let
Hmm.
us delve into it. Yeah, I like that. War of the Worlds. I like that.
Hmm.
Sasquatch. Yes, I enjoy that kind of freaking Jacques Cousteau. Although
Hmm.
he's more into the, but still, I like. Yeah, I like that. But one thing is liking that and understanding what is actually going on.
Hmm.
You're not being. They're playing to that Indiana Jones in you, but this guy's making a living off that, and he's belittling the scientific world at every turn when he says, and he went on Joe Rogan and he did exactly that. Well, there's this other channel that is an actual like archaeology kind of guy,
Hmm.
and he broke down his interview with Joe Rogan and the words that he used, because words are important, and people usually just throw them out there apart from being poetic in their discourse. But if you're being specific about something, make sure to be specific and as correct as possible.
Yeah.
Choose your words wisely as best you can if you're a serious person in any event.
Yeah.
And nobody's perfect, but this guy is hell bent on, and there's a mystery there. It's unknown. They're trying to hide it from you, and this and that. Well, this guy went and broke it down, Mark, piece by piece
Hmm.
of what he was saying, and then he compared it to archaeology. He said, "Look, this is what we're doing. Now we may not get X, Y, and Z right, but the data is there.
Hmm.
You can't just off up and go and say, oh, we're not doing anything and we're covering something. No, there's many people working on different aspects of the thing."
Hmm.
And so I found it in the topic that I've been interested in as a general thing, to see that little back and forth play between someone that's making a big to do about um, the mystery of it, but without delving in for a very novice or innocent minded public.
Hmm.
And then you have this other layer of people actually working their whole lives,
Yeah.
like breaking apart little pages of manuscripts and cleaning them. That's all they do day after day, week after
Yeah.
week, month after month, in order to get a freaking letter out that they can match with the other and stuff. So, um, so I'll end it with this. It goes back to that same thing that we said one or a few videos ago, where we talked about the Little Mermaid being
Hmm.
represented as you have pop history,
Hmm.
for the masses, Hollywood pop history. That's what kind of most people are. Oh yeah, of course the pirates went to Peter Pan's Neverland. Like you have those type of, and that's
Hmm.
kind of. It looks like it's a broad amount of people,
Well,
and then you have the serious work, which says something different. But the masses, it looks
right.
like, believe a watered down account of history, and they're ripe for such um, people to
Well,
take
yeah,
advantage.
it's a built-in audience because, well, we have also been conditioned by pop culture in
Oh,
that, forensic evidence. Well, that's certain then, you know. We could take a DNA sample and we can match that DNA. Well, maybe. Then again, maybe not. And it doesn't happen in a 90-minute episode. That could take years. You know, you nailed it when you said a lot of this is somebody's life's work. So it's not like there's an immediate result right now. Well, how come we don't know what happened? Well, because it just happened. We haven't even investigated it yet. We might know, we might have not have an answer for years. This is early days. We're just starting. You can't have a wrap up in a 90-minute episode. That's not real life, you know?
well, but and also when you the public at large, and this is one of my
Hmm.
newfound discovery, self found discovery. It's been probably known forever, but my realization: you have the broad concept of something,
Hmm.
and then you have the nuance of something. The broad concept of something is a recap generalization that serves to move the conversation forward,
Hmm.
but um, it requires the people participating to accept the broad claim, um, and then move forward. But it is an inaccurate way
Right.
to conduct a conversation if it is for a casual bar sip and
Hmm.
chat type thing. But if it's a serious conversation, one's knowledge is shared and tested, and
Hmm.
back
And
and
peer
forth.
reviewed, and it's gone over by other people and checked against this other study that showed something else. And well,
Yeah,
they found it, they got an entirely different result over here. And they came to a completely different conclusion over here. So let's get together with them and let's compare notes and see where they reconcile, what's going on. So,
yeah, exactly. So that's but I found it interesting because I had seen that episode of the
mhm,
Joe Rogan, but I saw a little bit of it and then I got tired of it
yeah,
because I see the other stuff, the
mhm,
in-depth stuff.
yeah,
It's still for a novice audience to observe
sure.
the in-depth stuff
Mm.
because they're just giving you a report of what they're doing,
Mhm.
and you're there watching it. But it's more on the level of, hey, this specific thing.
Yeah, you're getting the cliff notes. Yeah.
But the other stuff is not even cliff notes. The other stuff is just rounding up to the whole numbers, and basically,
Hmm.
uh, if you do that, you're left with a sensationalistic. You're left free to think whatever the hell you want. And even though you're allowed to think whatever the hell you want, when it comes to, you can't say, there was a war once in this area and they won and that's the end of it. Well, yeah, you can say that,
Hmm.
but depending on the scenario, there were actual details. How did they win? What
Hmm.
was the weaponry that they used? Where were they positioned?
Hmm.
So those two things, but the rounding up, people then make leaps of
Yes.
assumptions, and we end up believing a history that's not very even remotely accurate. Like for instance, whatever I've been learning, it's still not a complete, or let's call it not even close to 100% accurate, because I'm missing all the details that
Right.
you can only experience, number one, by studying it in depth for years and years, but even more by actually living it. So nobody knows better than the people at Pompeii
Yeah.
than anybody else anyhow.
Right.
you
Right.
know?
All we can do is we can speculate. We can piece together certain things. We can piece together accounts from other people in the area who weren't there at ground zero. That's how we know that there was an earthquake there, and most of the city had been evacuated. And a lot of the damage done to the city was done by that earthquake. We also know that people were just starting to come back when the volcano erupted. And what killed most of those people was the pyroclastic flow, which is poisonous gases, hot, superheated gases that come flowing down the side of that volcano and just overwhelm them.
It sounds like a night after cabbage stew.
Then the ash started settling on them, and over the centuries turned to concrete, basically.
They found uh, a house,
Mm-hmm.
and in it was a shelf. If I recall well, they did find a house, and they did find. But if I recall well, there were manuscripts or scrolls rolled
Mm-hmm.
up, but they burnt rolled up.
Yeah.
So, and this was found like I think it was found either in the 17 or 1800s. I'm not sure exact when.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept those scrolls, and people at the time would use those scrolls that were burnt up as firewood.
Yeah.
But then a king, I think it was either the king of France or I don't know what the story was, they said, hold your horses. Because he was into, whoever that king was, I forget now,
Mm-hmm.
was into conserving history. So they said, whoa. And then they conserved all that.
Yeah.
And it took up until recently that there's like technology where they do the scan. Actually, dude, are we in like parallel world? They take one of those scanning things we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
earlier,
Yeah.
and they figured out a mathematical, I don't know what this and that, to recreate, to take that roll
Mm-hmm.
and actually computer open it.
Yeah.
So that
Unroll it and read it. Yeah.
and so yeah, it's so freaking crazy, dude.
The stuff that they can do with computers now is just absolutely nuts. And it's strange. Well, not necessarily strange, but it's kind of funny because a lot of people say, well, what did we ever get out of space exploration? Well, in order to get to space, we had to start getting into quantum physics. And a lot of this technology that we're working with is a direct result of that study of quantum physics. So it's not that going to the moon led to the MRI machine, but it was exploring the math and exploring the physics needed to get us to the moon that directly led to the MRI and has directly led to a lot of the technology that we're using today. And I don't mean just satellite communication, but without getting into and studying quantum physics, we couldn't have done any of this.
I think it was the lizard people, but I
Yeah.
guess we can.
Well, there's that part of the audience too. If I can't do it myself, it must have been aliens. You know.
it's
So
a it's
I'm
it's it's a tough one.
I want to say something real quick. Our buddy Jamie Page is out in the chat. Jamie, how you doing? I want to wish Jamie a happy birthday. You're what, 19 now, something like that? Um, he's a little older than that. I kid him. But happy birthday, man. Hope you had a good one. I know it's no longer your birthday over there because you're 8 hours ahead of me. So, it's dark early in the morning over there. So it's no longer his birthday, but I hope you had a happy one.
I will now unexpectedly perform a birthday poem to Jamie Page live on air that will always be. I don't expect rhyming to happen, but let us flow. Jamie Page, JP, what an age. Happy birthday, Jamie Page from Kent, England, Margate, somewhere thereabouts. You ruined my toilet, you ruined my garage, um, but this is a poetic homage. Clunk.
Happy birthday, Jameis Page.
And remember how to read instructions when using hodgepodge.
There you go. So yeah, happy birthday, man. Anyway, apropos of absolutely nothing, we were kind of skirting around the subject that I had on the back burner here. And I had heard of this. I think it's a lot of it sounded familiar. But have you ever heard of the steamboat Arabia?
The steamboat, or no,
Okay. The Arabia was a steamboat that for many, many years worked the Mississippi River, and it was sold a couple, three times, and then it started working the Missouri River. And it was wrecked. See, it was built in 1853, and in 1856, it was, let's see, it was on a trip. Um,
down the mighty Mississippi.
no, down the Missouri near Parkville, Missouri. Uh, it was carrying cargo to supply 16
Um,
frontier towns. And it was on September 5th, 1856. It was a routine trip. It hit a submerged sycamore tree snag, and it ripped the hull open and flooded with water and sank to the bottom. All of the upper decks stayed above water, and the only casualty was a mule. All the people survived. Well, after that, it sank so rapidly into the mud by the next morning, only the smokestacks and the pilot house was above water. Within the next few days, it sunk further, and eventually the smokestacks were swept away by the current and everything else. There were several salvage attempts and they all failed. And eventually it was completely submerged. That was in 1856. Um, since then, the Missouri River, its course has changed and it has shifted. In 1987, they discovered it in a farmer's field a half a mile from the river. Okay. So they got a hold of the farmer who owned it, and they said, we'd like to come try to dig it up. It was a guy named Bob Hawley and his two sons. The owners of the farm gave him permission, go ahead and dig it up, but you have to be finished before spring planting season because this is a wheat field. So, okay, fine. So they commenced to work November 13th, 1988, right after the harvest. They started digging. They used the 100-ton crane. They started digging uh, holes around it. They found the ding dong thing. They turned on pumps and they started pumping water out of there. They were pumping 20,000 gallons of water per minute out of there to get to it. Now I'm going to do something that I very, very rarely do. And I'm going to share a screen because I have a picture of it here. That is what they ended up with. They dug this out of a farmer's field, and there is what's left of the steamship.
That's insane, dude.
And all of this, there are the boilers. There's one of the paddle wheels. And they took as much of it as they could out of here. There's some of the pilot house right there.
So wait, let's hold on for a second before you
Okay.
continue with the story.
Okay.
So in shy of 200 years,
Mm-hmm.
from 18, oh, you said 1850s?
1856 is when it sunk. And they did this in 1988.
So close to 200 years, just about roughly thereabouts.
Uh-huh.
that boat, due to the river shifting
Mm-hmm.
and all that soot and
Mm-hmm.
dirt, ended up on top of it.
Yes. And the
That
river is now a half mile away.
that
This used
is
to be where the river was,
no,
facing
no.
in
I
this
get
direction.
no, I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that. But my point is
Mm-hmm.
that as we continue with the story, I felt that even though obvious, that's something to frickin' accentuate for half a second because it's impressive.
Yeah.
Within 100 and something years, shy of 200,
Yeah.
a river that was there
Mm-hmm.
ended up a half mile away, leaving this boat and all that dirt and muck
Mm-hmm.
that became basically walkable land.
Yeah. Well, and farmable. This is all the wheat field.
But
So,
here's my furthering of that.
and you can
Imagine
see the layers.
imagine imagine
Mm-hmm.
this scenario in any old part of the world across history,
Mm-hmm.
where in less than 200 years a river shifts and whatever was sat there
Uh-huh.
is now has now become. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out, that it's an amazing thing. Continue.
It is. It truly is amazing. And these are these huge pumps that I was talking about because the water table is so shallow. They were pumping out, like I said, 20,000 gallons a day. And I stand corrected here. That's the bow right there, that tip. This is the hull right here, and this is the superstructure has slid off of the bow, or off of the hull rather. So they're standing on the hull of the ship.
Did they find the mule?
You know what, they never said. They never said in any of the articles that I read
Poor
about.
little guy, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. So I agree. Um, but that was the boilers. They couldn't get. I don't think they got them out. I'm not sure. But in February, so this is when they had it all uncovered. In February, they put all the dirt back, and the farmer got to plant his field. So all this was done between November and February, and the
Can
farmer
you can
was
you
able to
show us
plant
an
his
after
field.
photo of the actual boat cleaned up?
Well, they didn't take the whole boat out. What they did take out was the cargo. Now, I can show you pictures from an article that I read. One of the articles that I read, they built a museum dedicated to this thing. And this is some of the stuff that they took from, and I can't make the pictures any bigger. I really wish I
What's
could.
what's the green?
That's celery.
It still looks like that, or they replaced it?
No, it still looks like that.
No, they replaced it. Come on,
They
really?
did not replace it. This is all the original cargo. The cargo was perfect. It became so well preserved that it was, here's the kicker of it. It was a cargo full of, like I said, enough to supply 16 small towns, but there was a huge cache of champagne and cognac that is still drinkable. And they said tastes perfect. All this food is perfectly preserved and is edible today.
That's crazy.
Eyeglasses. They were just reading glasses. They found 4,000 pairs of shoes. This is what it was moored at the riverbank.
Unbelievable.
Then there's an ad for this trip. The steamer Arabia headed for Kansas, St. Joseph, Council Bluffs, and Sioux City. This was the first artifact they found. It was a shoe from the Goodyear Rubber Company that was lying on the main deck. It was a rubber shoe. And you can read Goodyear's Shoe Company No, I can't read. Naga something. I can't read it.
Nagasaki.
There are the shoes. Now, this is, I'm going to see if this is a bigger picture. Yes, it is. This is pre Civil War. And they're all in perfectly wearable condition. These
That's
were in barrels and in crates and in cases. That saddle, all of these shoes, all of these boots, this was part of the cargo. I mean, it's just fascinating to me.
yeah. It's really historically crazy. What are
Um,
those?
these are clay pipes for tobacco pipes.
Right.
They said that they found okay, here we go. Crates, oops, crates of cognac and champagne just as they did in 1856. Household matches are dry enough to light the cords of still fragrant tobacco that could still be smoked in the dozens upon dozens of preserved delicate clay pipes.
That's insane.
They pulled so much out of this thing while they had the chance. They said that the collection is so big, they estimate it's going to take another 10 years to present it all.
Well, yeah,
And
because they do the process that we were talking about. That
exactly.
they have to examine well and all this.
They've
And
got to
that.
clean it, they've got to preserve it, they got to, it was just wow. uh, Pistols.
Click on that one.
Open image, a new tab, and that's them there. And that was the day they discovered. You can see they're out in the mud. And just, I mean, it's amazing. This kind of thing is really amazing to me. So okay, so that's basically it.
Go back to the earlier images and show them big as well, so that we
Yeah, let's
that
take a
one's
look at that. That opened here. And we just have coffee grinders and pitchers. There were barrel upon barrel full of dishes. Some of this stuff we really don't know what it is because we don't use them anymore. But like these scales, and this is tack for horses or maybe even for oxen or something like that, leather straps. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. I can see a hand plane down here and a saw back here. But medicine bottles and what have you. Just all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, fruit, preserved fruits.
the celery that's over 200 years old.
Mm-hmm. I can't tell if these are cherries or olives.
You know what they looked like from afar when it was small? I thought it was pepper.
This looks like pepper to me, but I may be wrong. I don't. I really don't know. But it's God. This kind of thing just fascinates me. So they have a museum. They built a museum right there close by, and you can go to the museum and you can see this collection as it grows.
1850s.
1856 is when the boat sunk. Yes. So we're talking pre-Civil War. And then there is that one there. It was located 45 feet down.
Might as well see that one big.
Well, that was this one.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah. They said it was located 45 feet down.
That's 45?
Mm-hmm. 45 feet deep.
Freaking
Imagine
crazy.
they dug a little bit deeper than that.
Is that the farmhouse all the way up at the top in the corner?
This up here looks like a tank.
Oh yeah,
I'm
you're right.
betting you it's a fuel tank to run the pumps.
That's some insane stuff, dude.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
sure. Wow.
yeah. But it was real cool. They said they didn't dig it up to create a museum. This was the adventure of finding buried treasure.
And they
And
found it.
they found it, you know. It was when they reached the cargo holds, they discovered what would be the biggest time capsule of 19th century um, American history. You know, they let's see here. Well, anyway, they said who all, what all, little. Okay, the Arabia was going to be supplying everything needed for 16 outpost towns. That meant everything from axes to saddles to skillets to umbrellas. They found The team found over 4,000 shoes and boots and over 3 million Indian trade beads. They don't have any pictures of the beads or anything. But this is all in the museum now that's in Kansas City.
That's a great. That would be a great museum to visit.
Yeah, it would be. And Linda and I went to Kansas City. Oh boy, that would have been 94, something around there. And I'd never even heard of it, or otherwise I'd have stopped.
A lot of
But
those items. A lot of those items. If you think about
mhm,
the purpose that they were intended for use at the time,
mhm,
distributing it up the river to the various towns, inland or whatnot,
mhm.
would have been used in their day, purchased from the various shops that bought them from whatever,
Yeah.
used for the families at the time. But you could picture, like everything else that happens with all of us, that certain items, be it because they're ubiquitous or they run the course of their use, become trash or just break. And
Hmm.
little by little, certain things that no longer are produced 10, 20 years after the fact, like maybe that style of or that style of glasses or just
Hmm.
any number of things, it becomes the passe, and then new stuff takes its place, and then little by little across history.
Hmm.
So now you have a museum with an actual official date and various items of the same kind.
Hmm.
It's you
In
can't put a price on it.
in mainly pristine condition. That's the thing, because these were brand new items that were packed in crates and barrels and various different containers
You know how many
and
people? You know how many
shoved down
people?
into the cargo hold. Go ahead.
You know how many people in that in that tragedy that happened
Hmm.
at their local towns were waiting
Hmm.
for a pair of glasses so they can read a
Oh
damn
yeah.
book, and they never got it that go round, and
Hmm.
they must have been, what the hell? And I bet that must have been huge news.
Well, every time you see like a picture in the newspaper of like a FedEx truck on its side on the freeway, it's the same thing. Somebody's going, "Where the hell's my package?" You know. So,
Yeah, but in this case, that was some pretty crazy items because
yeah,
I mean, hell,
yeah. I mean, some store owner is waiting for those 4,000 shoes. You know, well, in 16 towns, I don't know how many shoes each, but there's a bunch of store owners going, "Where the hell is my cargo? I paid for this." You know, so yeah, but everybody got off of the ship alive. So there was, like I said, one mule was a casualty, but other than that, yeah. Now, Jim Dockrell says, um, "Did they find that dang sycamore tree?" Yeah, I don't know. The article doesn't say. And Jamie wants me to send him a link. I will send it to you as soon as we're done live here. Okay. Um, we went through in like 94. I don't know if the museum was up and running yet, but they had found it because they found it in November of 87. They started digging and they buried back what was left in February of 88.
Did you
So,
know that just to say in the, just to roughly stay in the theme, or go ahead, tell me what you were going to say, but I have something that's roughly within the world of this in terms of like antiques and this and that.
well, they go on further in this article to say that they have found another ship. They didn't say where because I imagine they're trying to keep it to themselves, but they know that river paths move, they change. And we foolishly think we can keep a river within its current banks, and nature always has its own ideas. The fact that paddle wheeler was a half a mile away from where the river is now is kind of proof of that. Well, they found another one and they're in the process of marking it out and getting ready to start excavating it. And I believe it was called the Midas, but I could be wrong on that. I'd have to go back and look at the article again to make sure. But they've kind of got the fever now. They found one. They want to keep exploring these. They want to keep checking them out just because of, and it's not like they're grabbing this stuff and selling it or anything like that. No, they started a museum at what was an old fruit market in Kansas City. And now they found another ship. They're going to, who knows, there may be a Midas museum one day in another city.
Yeah, the museum aspect of it is probably the more ideal, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
at least for now. Well, it would be, but because you have an American story
Mm-hmm.
set in a place with all the
Mm-hmm.
details at hand, and that's necessary generationally
Yeah.
for education purposes. So I can see that that's the best they did. What they did was awesome.
Yeah. And that kind of thing fascinates me. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about Pompeii and Herculaneum and what have you, that it doesn't have to be thousands of years old to be that mystery, that treasure hunt. Now 1856, yeah, that was a hundred and some odd years ago. Well, let me do the math. Whoops, back up.
176 years ago, more or less, or 180 something years ago.
168 years ago.
Okay.
So you don't have to go back thousands of years to find things that are so different that a lot of them we don't know what the hell it was. We have some idea, and maybe we can compare it to something else in a museum. But it's just exploring the technology of the time, what they used at the time, and just seeing who we were and what we were at the time. How did people dress? I mean, looking at all these reading glasses and all these shoes, and there were clothes, there were garments, but it was, pretty cool. I love it.
So, um, well, three things, main themes, just rush through my with this whole story
Hmm.
because it's so vivid. Well, then again, apart from the story, you had
Hmm.
the actual photos, so that kind of really nailed it.
Hmm.
Solidified the story. One side note is this about 100 years ago, this or that, and
Hmm.
people using things and whatnot. The concept of commerce comes to mind, and it's been around forever and a day. Um, and it made me think of those little glass doves that people during the Roman era, which is found all over Europe.
Hmm.
There were these glass hollow doves filled with perfume,
Okay, yeah.
and they were sealed. So for the woman or the guy or whatever, I would assume it was more of a woman's use. I can't picture, but then again, anything's possible. Um, Come on, let's vogue. The Roman soldiers
Hmm.
in configuration. But I could picture. So in order to get to the, I don't know why Madonna came into my. They would break the little glass
Hmm.
by the neck or the tail, and they would use it in that
Hmm.
fashion. Um, so this manufacturing or replication of certain items that people could make a dime off of, let's say,
Hmm.
is a continuum throughout history in different. I mean, in
Yeah.
different, and so yes, it doesn't have to be ancient, like you said. It could be just 100 years. It could be really. It could be from the 1950s, and it still
Yeah.
holds value. Especially this thing was pretty unique, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. But with that said, um, and anything you want to say about that? Because I have a couple of thoughts about this whole.
Well, it's just that piecing together. I mean, they described it as a time capsule, and that's absolutely what it was. And Linda corrected me, and thank you very much for that, Linda. The other ship is the Malta, not
Okay.
the Midas, the Malta. So
Okay.
there may be a Malta museum coming. That sounds like something you make with milk. Malta museum. Oh, okay.
Mo-
Anyway,
mo-
yeah. So, but just that time capsule, because that kind of thing does interest me. I like exploring old stuff and seeing old stuff, the old technology, say before the internal combustion engine, how they would just do something simple and silly as laundry. How did you wash your clothes? They had the big plunger, and you would plunge it in these big containers full of water and just agitate to get the water flowing through the fabric to clean all the yuck out of it. And it wasn't something you did once a week. You might do laundry 3 times a year if you were lucky, because it was a major production to wash all your clothes.
where?
And, well, anywhere, basically anywhere, but especially in America,
No, but
because, when you figure a lot of this was out on the range, you know, um, there is, okay, I'm leading up to something else that I didn't intend on going to, but I will. There is a series of books that were started in the 1960s that was called Foxfire, and they're still being published today, and the museums are still there. This was started by a English teacher in this little Appalachian school in extreme northern Georgia in the Appalachian Mountains. He wanted to get his kids interested in not only in reading and writing and therefore learning English, he wanted them to be interested in their history and in themselves. And so basically, what he did was he got these kids to start interviewing some of the elders in town and ask them about the old days. How did you do this? How did you do that? How did you build a house? How did you take care of yourself when you got sick? We have several volumes of those books. And one of the articles in there was, how did you wash your clothes? And these kids would ask these elderly people, and this is back in the 1960s. So we're talking about people who were alive in their, oh man, in the 19 teens or the early 1900s, or maybe even the late 1800s. And that's where I got that from. This was a huge deal. Doing your laundry would take a couple of days.
you said everywhere. I have thoughts about that, but
Well,
can you clear that up?
but I've also read things about people out on the trail. Remember, I got a cousin who wrote a book about leading a wagon train from Missouri. So it was more or less the similar thing. They it was a big production to wash clothes.
For this scenario, not everywhere.
Well, I would imagine, you could take it down to the river and smack it on a rock. But yeah, if you didn't have a river, you had to bring the water to you.
Right. Wherever there's rivers and
Hmm.
lakes and such and this and
Right.
that. Um, because
But
I
it,
can't picture. Can I make my
yeah, go
inquiry?
ahead. Go ahead.
Because I'm having and just for clarity, you're not saying everywhere, and that was common life in days gone by a century or so ago. If you are saying
Anywhere
that,
where there wasn't running water, I would
okay. But
imagine,
besides that,
you know.
but besides that,
Mhm.
you can picture. Okay, here's my issue. Other than that you're saying, which of course, if
Mhm.
there's no running water, but anywhere there is running water, and let's say there's a family, and let's say there's one, two, three, or who knows how many women in a village, town, whatever, I can picture maybe some women being dirty, but just the natural flow of, at least from my experience, I can't picture them not saying, "This ain't cutting it, Sam. This ain't cutting it, Bill. This ain't cutting it, Timothy. Laundry day." I don't see it as even if I don't see it as something. I think I see it as part of the natural. Um, you know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Like I
I
can't.
get what you're saying, but something you need to remember is bathing every day is a relatively new thing. Bathing every day for centuries, it was thought that bathing would make you sick.
Yeah, but you're saying bathing. I'm talking about what you're talking about, clothing.
Okay, and
So you are
um,
saying that they rarely, even in
I'm
areas.
saying that they saved up. They would wear their clothes several days in a row and then put on something else. They would save up and then they would do it all at once because it was a big production, because they washed their clothes in boiling water, and boiling water was a chore, especially when you're doing it over a wood fire.
Okay, I'll
So,
just throw this in to be in medieval times
mhm,
as a fact, and it's still there, at least in the villages in Cantabria. And I can't picture it not being in other parts of Europe, wherever there's mountains and
maybe.
waters coming from the. Well, let me finish this so
Mhm,
you know exactly what I'm saying. And I couldn't imagine that streams coming from mountains, and, into villages and into streams and rivers.
mhm,
I can't imagine, because in Cantabria, and it can't be just there, at the village points where the water comes down and it would become either
mhm,
creeks or rivers or such, they would bypass certain lines of the river
mhm,
so that it would flow into these long, I guess you'd
mhm.
call them, like the horse, where horses with the long wooden horse
Troughs.
troughs. They would, but these troughs were made out of stone,
Mhm,
and they would decorate the troughs and stuff, and so just like the
mhm,
Romans did, actually.
mhm,
um and so they would they would frequent them in the village centers, not only for
mhm.
water and such, but for bathing. So they had the stones where they would clean and whatnot, and this and that.
Right.
And so anyways, all I'm saying is that I don't see it as, yes, the bathing thing. I could definitely picture it's a new thing, but the cleaning clothes thing, I see it as a frequent thing. You get dirty, you save up, fine, but
Mhm.
I see it
Okay.
as something that would happen.
Okay. I was mainly talking about America, but every civilization had their own way, but you also had to have access to water. So that was the primary thing, was having access to water. Yes, if you were by a river or by a lake, you probably could. Heck, you could just jump in the water fully dressed and wash yourself and your clothes at the same time. But uh, it was saved up and it was done on a larger scale because it was a lot of work to wash clothes, is what I'm getting at. So it was a special thing, and they might do it 3 times a year just because it was such a big production. And they would beat it and pound on it and this, that, and the other to get as much water out of it, and then hang it up, and then off they go. So bathing came in and out of fashion several times. The Romans were, and the Greeks were all famous for their baths. And the British, a lot of people think, well, the British, they were all puritanical and they didn't believe in taking bath. No, there were baths all over Great Britain. So that was not really the case. But it went in and out of fashion. And the perfume replaced the the bath, basically. And that was a big thing in France during the reign of Louis the 14th. They didn't bathe. They would on occasion, but it wasn't a daily thing.
Yeah, the bathing part is a different
Hmm.
category than the although it's close together, but the clothing part, I just
Hmm.
it's something that because I have references that can
Hmm.
actually be and so I wanted to clear up whether that, but you're saying more to do with America and frontier
Yes,
experience.
pioneer and frontier,
Okay.
and just mountain dwellers. You know, you would have trappers and stuff. We're talking about guys who would go out and be up in the mountains for months at a time and come back. They didn't wash clothes. Part of what they did when they got back with all their furs and everything is they sold them. They bought new clothes. They didn't bother washing them. Of course, they weren't exactly out there dating either. They're living rough in the mountains and what have you. And they were just trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no,
um,
we have definitely
but
a different lifestyle
mhm.
in that respect and many other ways as well. So yeah.
But that's the fascinating thing to me is the way they did it with the, okay, let's just think an old washboard or even an old ringer sewing machine. Hell, Linda, when she lived at one place up in the mountains at a ranger station, she had she had a ringer washing machine that was gas powered. It had Briggs and Stratton engine on it because they didn't have electricity. So she'd have to go out there and fire up the Briggs and Stratton so she could do a load of clothes, you know.
Yeah. But you
And
see the difference between
mhm.
saying something to the that's why I wanted clarity on that. Were you saying X or were you saying
Well,
Z?
some
Yeah.
cultures, I'm sure they had slaves that did all that. They didn't care.
Well, it depends on
Um,
the time, but I'm saying with
sure.
confidence right now, and we can look into it, but that I guess it depends from place to place, like everything else.
Hmm.
But um, washing was a thing. Talking about clothing,
Oh, yeah, it was a thing. There's no doubt.
because there's no way. I mean, there is a way, but I put it on the yes frequent, not every day. Oh, honey, I spilled some ketchup on my shirt.
Hmm.
Let's do a
Yeah.
load. Not
Hmm.
that, but I'm saying that they would gather, clean, do the
Oh,
thing,
yes.
scrape them, like everything. I'm kind of a stickler lately, and I could be wrong, but I don't think so. That 1800s, it wasn't stone. Not that you're saying that, but like I don't want to give the impression 1800 stone, like like just completely ooga ooga. No, I think that yes, that they did such things. The bathing thing, there's a lot
It
of
also depends on where they were because if you're a farmer, you don't really care if your clothes are clean because you're going to be out there plowing again tomorrow. You don't really give a ding dong. So if your clothes are a little bit dirty, that's different from living in New York where you have to wear a business suit and you're in an office. So I would imagine they had people doing laundry for them, drop off this and do that. I need these cleaned. When can I pick them up? You can come back for that Thursday. Okay, fine. That was happening. I mean, way back. That was happening in the 1700s in the bigger cities. But the guys out on the farm, it wasn't that important that they look their best when they're out behind, you know, two oxen pulling a plow. They really didn't give a ding dong.
if they
So
had
when
12
we have
children,
to, we'll do it. There's other work that needs to be done that's more important.
if they had 12 children, like most people had
Hmm.
8, 12, this and that, you
Hmm.
had this whole group, this whole family.
Hmm.
And yes, people tended to this and that, but there were children that tended and adults that tended to things like laundry. I mean, obviously it depends from place to place, but I
Hmm.
would not push it to and I'm talking about worldwide. But if we say America, then I guess we could get a little bit more refined and say
Hmm.
more towards it was more of an extreme chore that was preserved for intervals. But I
Yeah,
would still, if
we
I
do
had
it
to,
when we have to because there's more important work to be done.
yeah. Well, if I had to put down money on it, I would side with giving it more frequency. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong or this and that. But I personally, from my, I would put more frequency in that, especially if there's a family and this and that. And my only qualm with it is the yes, I get what you're saying, and I think it's true as well. Like I'm not trying to, but I'm saying like to
You
see.
can't you can't get past the yuck.
No, well, yeah, I don't want to. No, I can see what you're saying, so I get it. Yes, but I don't want to overemphasize and then like you have all this population here of just like remember that guy from Peanuts Gallery with the
Oh,
flies.
Pigpen.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's my only point. That's why I sort of push back a little bit. But yes, I get what you're saying. But again,
Yep.
no,
I then again, I can only go by what I read in those books, and it was more than one person saying, yeah, they saved up and did it maybe 3 times a year, and that
yeah,
was
but
simply because it was so much work.
you read whatever books you read.
And this was all up
Who,
and down the Appalachian Mountains. Yeah.
who wrote the books? And I'm not asking you now, but I'm saying that what areas they were talking about and such and all that. And was it indicative of a countrywide? Was it indicative of an area? I mean, to be, because
Yep.
people in Pittsburgh, people maybe up
Well,
like
well, like I said, if you're in a big town, if you're in Pittsburgh or something like that, you could take your clothes to the laundry. A lot of people didn't do their own. If you were if you had a place to do your own laundry, you could put a washboard in a deep sink and you could do a couple of 3 garments in the evening and then hang them over the stove before you went to the bed. Sure. But if you're out on a farm or you're out in the middle of the plains where you don't have a river handy, you don't have a lake handy, you've got a well that you've dug, you got to get the water out, you've got to fill up the vessel, and then you got to wash the clothes. And it was a lot of work to do all of the above. So
yeah.
they did it as little as they could. Because if you're going to have to take a whole day, it put it to you this way, when it gets to that point, it's just as easy to boil 50 gallons of water as it is to boil 40. So if we're going to save up for a month, we can save up for 2. And if we can save up for 2, we can save up for 3. And
Not
now we
everyone
can take
boiled.
and now we can take 2 days to do the laundry.
Not everyone boiled. And if it's you with a pick climbing
Mhm.
up a mountain to look for whatever, or you're doing some sort of, that's a different story than if you're a family with
Mhm.
various children doing. I mean, there. Your point is to one extreme of the thing, emphasizing, and my point is to an. I want to say in between.
Mhm.
I can see a whole plethora of different scenarios,
Okay.
and the reason I'm making that distinction is because yeah, I can't imagine everybody or a lot or more, and maybe so, maybe they stunk to high. I mean,
They did stink to high heaven. They did stink to high heaven. Well, and like on the wagon train, I mean, Jesse Applegate wrote about it. Said occasionally, if there was moving water, the women would jump in and fill up buckets full to wash clothes. But they did it on the trail. So they didn't get to boil water because they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop and take a day to wash everybody's laundry. They moved every day. And depending upon how rough the trail was and what was going on, they might make 20 miles that day. They might make 5. It just depends on various things. But he said whenever the women could, they would dip up clean water that wasn't reserved for drinking. They would dip up clean water to wash clothes with, and they did it on the trail. They did it on the move.
Steve threw a curveball at me. If you can put that up.
Yes, Steve would. Yes, you would have been a dandy.
Well, that so you agree? Wait, let me see. Let's see. And I have a reply. So are you gonna? No, no. Put it. So do you agree with Steve's statement?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So in your mind and in Harneal's mind, my putting forward my concept equates to my personal bathing choices
Hmm.
because that's the math that you're doing in your heads.
No, because that's what it would have been called back then. If you bathed every day, you were a dandy. If you took care of your appearance and you always had your shirts ironed and, lint free jacket and things like that, and your shoes always shined, you were a dandy. And a dandy was just a person who was very picky about their appearance. That's all a dandy was.
I go back to my statement.
Hmm.
To use the logic. I
Hmm.
mean, I know he's farting around and stuff, but let's use that logic as if it were a serious thing. And
Hmm.
I asked you, are you and you agreed. So in your minds,
Hmm.
and you're the only one here to speak really on your end, which you agree with Steve.
Hmm.
You equate my reasoning as to how they would have handled bathing, and I
Hmm.
wasn't talking about bathing, I was talking about clothing, but the bathing was a side thing that I
Hmm.
wasn't touching on. It was brought in really, I
Yeah.
guess it's part of it, but it has nothing to
Yeah.
do with the point of this. So you're equating my personal up to date 2024 world. It makes no sense, but let's push it with my choice of what they would have or wouldn't have done back then. If that's the case,
Hmm.
that's the reasoning that you think that I'm reasoning that and coming to that conclusion, um, it's wrong. Because by the way, because I'm not. Do you see me any type of dandy at all? In any
I
event,
I have pictures of you dressed nicely in a nice suit and tie and what have you. I have pictures. You've sent them. You've posted them. And I'm not insulting you by calling you a dandy because I would have been a dandy too.
no, I'm happy to entertain
Hmm.
this, not as an insult, but like this thing, and clear and be clear about it. Not, I'm not offended, but I'm
Hmm.
curious to see how far that. So
Because it's just our habits these days of showering and taking care of our appearance, my beard notwithstanding, but our cleanliness, our want to wear clean clothes every day,
mhm.
even if we don't sweat, even if I don't work up a sweat, I don't want to wear the same shirt tomorrow because I wore it all day today.
Okay,
That's being
let's
a dandy
let
in back in those days.
so let's. By the way, I understand the dandy thing, the
Hmm.
dandy history, or the general history.
Hmm.
The top hat, at least in the early 1900s, they would do
Hmm.
the top hat and the cane and whatnot, but
Hmm.
that predates, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not my point here. My point is your conclusion
Hmm.
that I reached my conclusion about that history of washing and whatnot in the 1800s, that you think that I'm reaching that basically due to my up-to-date current life. I want to be clear that you truly
Yes.
honestly think that. Okay, all right,
Yes.
all right.
Yes. Because, and I'll tell you why. Because you have said several times, I can't imagine that they would do that. They would, they have big families, they have kids, they
Yeah,
there's
but there's a
chores
difference.
and this, that, and the,
But
but
there's a difference between imagining that and giving you examples of life back
but
then and
okay, but
examples.
well, let me finish. What I'm You couldn't believe that they would go that long without doing laundry because we wouldn't consider it. So you're taking this from a 20th and 21st century mindset. They had the 18th century mindset where, you know, uh, taking off your boots before you walked in the house so Ma didn't come flying out of the kitchen and smack you with a spoon. That was about as far as it went. You dusted off your clothes outside, then you came in the house and you washed with a pitcher and a bowl. You know, you didn't get naked and bathe. You just washed your face and hands with a pitcher and bowl, and that was about it. So doing laundry, while it was a necessary thing, it wasn't as important as other work that needed to be done. That was what I
Where
was getting at. Out on
where
the frontier, out in the plains, up in the mountains, on farms and
everywhere
ranches,
ubiquitously everywhere is what you're saying.
and ranches all over America. Yeah.
So you're saying that that was the norm.
Unless they had, yes, it was the norm, unless they had a staff that did it for them that would keep up with it. But if it's ma, pa, and 6 kids, other they have other things they got to take care of. They've got other work to do on the farm. If the kids went to school, they were lucky. I mean, my great grandfather made it to 6th grade, and his dad said, "That's it. You're done. You can read, write, and count. You're done. You can go work your ass on the farm." My grandfather was the first person in my family to graduate high school. So,
Yeah, but these things, just sticking. So I get that. And those are that's part of the life back then.
mhm.
So so you're
We
saying,
really got off on a tangent, though. But go ahead.
well, well, because you're saying that bathing, which is a sidetrack, was less, and I didn't disagree with you on that.
Hmm.
But the clothing part, which is the
Hmm.
stuff that you drape over you,
Hmm.
um, and the things that you sleep in, and I mean, it depends on so many factors.
Hmm.
To say that outright they did it once a week or this or that, and that was across the whole of um, of North America, let's say,
It was
or
common.
America, or
It was common.
common is one thing.
It depend, and it's regional depending upon where you were. It was the norm in a lot of areas. It
Com-
was not the norm in, like I said, in the big population centers.
Common is one thing, and I agree that yesteryear is different than today with
Hmm.
washing machines.
Hmm.
I'm under no illusion on that in that respect,
Hmm.
but it's also a little bit fantastical. If my thing is slightly fantastic, to use a flowery word, if my concept of it not being of it being more frequent than what you're suggesting,
Hmm.
right? If I'm fantastical from your point of view,
Hmm.
and I've given you examples of families and different
Hmm.
chores, and you're saying, well, no, this, then what we have here is two people in 2024, because we both have access to roughly the same information across the world, that have decided on two different extremes of a very simple issue, but it's not simple because it's the life of these people back then. You know, and we've landed on two different views of how
And one of us
extreme.
has read up on it, and another one of us hasn't.
Well, but I'm well, no, that's not okay. That's not true unless you are specific on what you're talking about. If you're talking about frontier land books and
Hmm.
how they would bathe in the frontiers in specific said regions
Hmm.
or out in the mid, if you go specific, then I concede that 100%, because now you're being when you said it was everywhere. If it was
Well,
just that was back then.
we were talking about America. We were talking about back in the 1800s.
Well, you mentioned Europe as well. Like, you added a lot of stuff, and I
Well,
was
you added Europe, you added Cantabria and everything. We were talking about America because I was talking about the technology that was found on this steamship
but the
in
reason I
Missouri
added, but to be fair,
and all this.
the reason I added Europe was because you said everywhere, and I said, well, here's an example. So basically, I'm giving you
Okay,
examples. Just I wanted to see the picture that you're forming of the
okay.
past.
Then you're being too literal. When I say everywhere, I'm talking about everywhere in the context of the area that we were talking about. No, I
Okay,
don't know how they do their laundry in Bhutan. I don't know how they did it in Kazakhstan.
right, right,
That's
right.
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this area here where we were discussing,
Okay,
especially right around Missouri, um, around the plain states, Nebraska, Kansas, things like that, where there's not a
okay.
huge abundance of water.
Okay,
running or otherwise.
okay,
So,
that's fair. That's fair. So in
so
that, I will concede.
mhm.
Honed into that because when you said it was ubiquitous, kind of, sort of, I was saying, well, wait a second, and that's why I brought in those examples.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know what they did in Japan, and I don't know what they did in Spain or France or did in France, but only because I thought it was strange. Because much like yourself, I didn't believe that they would go that long without a little bit of hygiene.
They did perfume to cover up.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they did big
yeah,
time. And they wore powdered wigs because it was fashionable. Because one of the kings was bald and he wore a wig.
and they
So,
copied,
and they copied. Yes,
and it became the high.
it
Yeah. So
became the
so
thing.
so
So,
I concede. I concede
mhm,
in now that you honed it because I I had to ask the question.
mhm,
And as far as Dandy, with Steve's Dandy and you saying, oh, I agree completely.
because
And my
we all would have been dandies
and my
based
short
based on the way we are today as
well,
compared to the way they were.
in which Steve was making a jokey joke and stuff
Sure.
and whatever. But I
Mhm,
wanted to explore that to see, what the hell. But I don't think that that's what Steve was just was
mhm.
doing one of these was doing one of these, but to be fair, um, if I'm a if I'm
A Yankee Doodle dandy.
if I'm a dandy, I hate to see better examples because I am so rough. I am so extremely rough around it. You have no well, you should have an idea because but yeah, I don't know, man. But
Mhm.
still, with that said, I didn't take it in an offense style, but I wanted to
Yeah.
clear up what the hell.
Yeah.
Are you serious? Let's see about this. I
Yeah.
concede the point that you're saying they're out in frontier
Well,
land. They're trying to make it. Yes, I concede.
my main thing though was about the difference in technology and exploring the old ways that they did stuff because things were just done differently. You know, we don't have to worry about shoeing horses unless you happen to be one of the let's not say wealthy, but you have to be living pretty damn well to be able to afford to keep a horse. And in which case it does concern you. But the average mope like you and me, we don't care about shoeing horses, so we don't have really any farrier's tools.
I can
But
imagine.
just seeing how they did that, how they made the bridles and the saddles to be able to hook up two horses to a wagon to get them to town, because we don't have to do that. So that kind of thing, there's a fascination in it.
As a side note, and I conceded
Mm-hmm.
publicly and with
Mm-hmm.
no problem. Okay, it makes sense. And if I didn't concede after the fact, I would ponder it because I'm just like that, and I would try to find reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't try to find reasoning to negate everything you said.
No,
Just
that's
I'm saying out loud how I think. I lean towards trying to say, well, wait a second, is he correct? And this and that. Depending on the subject, it doesn't matter the subject. I'm trying to figure out. Well, wait a second, is this and that? Now you have to skim through all the personal bias that one has in order to clear the deck, so you can.
well, sure.
But
You got to do that with everything.
the purpose of so any person would take this little aspect and just said, okay, fine, whatever, even if you have a doubt in your mind.
Mhm.
But the correct thing to do is to say, well, wait, let's look at that. And why? Because there's a difference between a pop culture view of history and then being nuanced. Now you and I don't know every family, obviously, or even a handful of
No,
families.
there's no way to know that.
Well, I'm saying like we weren't there observing from the hilltop and saying, "Aha, let's take inventory of what they do." But we have notions based on the things we've read and this and that. You've read
Mhm.
books on the specific area, um, and so there's a little bit more digging around and I think that that's fine. But but if I concede to everything you say that I have a doubt in,
Mhm.
not for malicious purposes or this. I'm just saying that
Mhm.
Mark, can you let's clear and how about you deal with this? Tell me what you think of this and stuff. As opposed to dandying me out to the village ball in a tux but if people don't even try doing that every once in a blue moon, what you end up with is a pop culture understanding of specifics of history. And if you're not going to talk about American history, not that you and I are like historians, but if we don't unpack a little bit further than just, oh yeah, people back in the 1800s, hick, um, we're not going to know much. We're not going to personally grow. So I, even though it's a simple little thing, I think it's important, and now I have to take it more serious. Um, the
The
conditions of the bathing, and do we opt to have fun and clean stuff, or let's get our work done? These are good things to talk about.
until it becomes a distraction from the main part of the conversation.
That's another thing, yes. But what the hell? I found use in it. I'm sorry I
Yeah.
dragged your ass into it, but I had the personal question, personal uh doubt when you said that, and I wanted to dig to see how far um you would unpack it.
Well,
and
I've read
and
several accounts from several people from several different regions. I didn't set out to find out how people did laundry, but it was mentioned often enough that I found it a little bit strange that it would be mentioned, because it's not something you and I would normally think of, because we take off a shirt, we throw it in the washer. There's 5 shirts in it, time to run the load. We
yeah,
don't even think about it, you know?
yeah.
So why would that even come up in conversation unless there was something different in the way they did it? Evidently there was, because they talked about it often enough. You know, they talked about washing dishes as well, and how you'd have a whole team of, all the girls, all the women, every female member of the household was in there in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, and the men, get the hell out of here, leave us alone. And that
You've
was
made a
pretty universal in just about everything that I read about different one cousin went to the extreme, and the house is still there, and it's his great granddaughter that owns it now. One cousin of mine, Charles Applegate, when he built his house, it's actually a duplex. It's two houses, two separate houses. The men lived on this side and the women lived on that side. And there was one pass through where the women could come into the dining room and serve dinner, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Other than that, they stayed on their side and the men stayed on their side. When a boy was out of short pants, he moved over to the men's side, and the men lived separate from the women. That's just the way he built the house. That's the way he wanted it.
I can't believe that, because I'm reflecting on, I can't believe the conclusions that people arrive at. This is why the asking question. You know how the old thing of there's
Mhm.
no uh there's no dumb question, or something like that. There's no dumb questions.
No
Um,
such thing as a dumb question.
there's no such thing as a dumb question. Here's the thing, though. You have, I mean, honestly, and I'm not saying this because of you guys specific, but it did open the door to. So if you guys did that, and you're like, the judgment was thinking about why I was thinking about said thing, and then um if you multiply that across America and the world, but let's say
Hmm.
in America, of people taking shortcuts,
Hmm.
and obviously, like I said earlier, we need to take shortcuts in casual conversation.
Hmm.
But of course, we're going to end up with a basic understanding, broadly speaking, not
Hmm.
us specifically, you or Steve, but just like as a nation. Of course, we're going to end up with a freaking Mickey Mouse history of freaking the United States. Mickey Mouse.
Well,
Because even though this is a small smidgen
hmm
of a thing, and it kind of came along based on that awesome story and museum that came about, that awesome story and museum that you shared with us sparked my curiosity. But my curiosity, and then you mentioned other things. But my curiosity based on that and the things that you said after, though challenging to the narrative that you were
Hmm.
unpacking, for me, I think that these little things are maybe not even the gunpowder, the storage of gunpowder, whatever the hell the topic. I think that,
Hmm.
I don't know. You get my point. I think that yes, some things can be troublesome, and maybe people don't want to touch on one thing or the next, or why bother with this, and it may be important to some, or somebody has an itching to know further or to see.
Hmm.
I get that complication of stuff, but if you
Well,
multiply people not wanting to explore,
hmm. Well,
and it just becomes like all of a
and
sudden everybody is related to Pocahontas, and you see what I'm saying?
I do, and that's exactly why that teacher got his kids to go out and start interviewing people, because he knew that with every old person that passed away, they took a wealth of knowledge with them that could never be retrieved. So he wanted them to get interested in their area. Yeah, you know old man Jessup down by the river. What was he known for? Well, he plays banjo. Where did he get his banjo? I don't know. Go ask him. Go interview him. Go talk to him about his banjo. Where
Before
did
it's
he
gone.
Yes, where did he get his banjo? How did he learn how to play it? Before he's gone, because he's taken that wealth of knowledge with him. It
Yeah.
turns out old man Jessup built his own banjo, and he showed these kids how to make a banjo. And the article contains all the patterns and plans. You can make a homemade banjo just like old man Jessup had. Another lady showed him how to take an ash log about 18 inches long and use a special kind of a blade to cut splits out of it and take those splits and weave baskets out of it. Something these kids had never thought of. And it's a I don't remember how many books are in this series, but I mean they're good thick books full of all kinds of articles like that. Just how they did things back in the day.
Steve wrote something that is also an important note,
What's that?
where he says, and even in places with rivers, when you lived in Indian country during the Indian Wars, washing clothes or people at the river needed guards. And that's a good point.
Yeah, that
Um,
is I've read that too.
yeah, well, you don't, in a situation like that, there were raids, and so all of that is, those are things to consider, because it's not like raids didn't occur, and it's not like settlers, let's say, weren't attacked. I mean, there are written accounts
Hmm.
of the era. I mean, legislation and troops were freaking maneuvered around the country or the countryside, in order to protect,
Hmm.
so yes, even in Florida, everywhere. So
Yeah,
yes, that's see, but that
but but but
is a
but
valid. That's a valid.
mhm,
That is a valid extra account.
mhm.
But,
So
but go ahead. Go ahead.
but then let's unpack that a little bit, because you have the women down at the river washing the clothes, and you had the men with their backs to them standing in a circle, basically guarding the whole thing, making sure nobody came along. Nobody was attacked. So you've taken the whole family away from the farm to do the laundry.
You don't have to. You don't have to
So
compound already
no,
your
I'm not. I'm just saying.
because
So we have to unpack that entire thing, because it was a big thing. That's the whole point that I was trying to make.
you don't. But you don't have to.
But
There's enough. Okay, so I can come up with scenarios
hmm.
like that
Hmm.
that are viable. As so, I'm not playing that. I already conceded.
Hmm.
Prior that
I get it.
I conceded.
Hmm.
I'm just saying that that added thing that Steve just added
Hmm.
is another thing apart from what you said with the farming and
Hmm.
such. And okay, I can see those things,
Hmm.
and so that's why I brought it up, that it's a good point, and there it's necessary if you're arguing the point, if I'm pushing against you guys.
Yeah.
But I said that I conceded people washed rarely. Got it.
Yeah.
I don't
I
find a
mean,
problem with it in
a lot.
specific cases.
A lot of times it wasn't by choice, though. That's what I'm getting at. So,
Yeah, that
um,
I can see that. I can see that. And
mhm.
okay. As opposed to everywhere, I'm okay to retract everything that I said before because you're being very specific. Yeah, I have no problem with it. Uh,
um, hot off the presses, just delivered to me. We have a few of those Foxfire books. This one's number 3, and this one gets into animal care, banjos and dulcimers, how to tan hides, summer and fall wild plants for food, butter churns and churning, growing ginseng, and still more affairs of plain living. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff and how they did it back in the day. And this particular one was published in 1973. Raising cattle, dipping gourds, um, building a smokehouse, building a lumber kiln, um, making apple butter, making brooms and brushes, things of that nature that you and I would never think about. But these kids went out and interviewed people and found out how to do these things so that that knowledge wouldn't be lost. And I think it's these books. I mean, if you ever get a chance to look at one, there's some interesting, very cool things in there. And they named it Foxfire. The kids named it. They started it as a newspaper to be sold in town to raise money for them for supplies for school.
and
And
what era was that?
it started in the 1960s.
Okay.
And basically, they sold enough newspapers and bound a couple of books, the first book, and sold it. It was such a big hit, and it came out right about the time the hippie thing was going on, and the hippies who were in the communes wanting to get back to nature, they ate it up. It sold so much and was so popular, they were able to build a new school from the proceeds of these books.
And this connects with what?
With the Appalachian Mountains in northern Georgia, and I want to say extreme southern, I believe it was Tennessee. Um, I want to, no, I don't think it was Tennessee, but right there in that area in the Appalachian Mountains, extreme northwestern Georgia, the real upper tip is the one area that I can remember because the school is actually located in Georgia.
Okay, Steve has a comment. Let's see what Steve now says with the dandy.
Okay, there you go.
The dandy comment wasn't meant as an insult. It has to do with the fact that you have been in cities your whole life, which colors your thoughts. I was that way until I lived in the country a while. So, but this prescription you're giving to my this is the very and by the way, whether or not that's your take, which it is because you're writing it, or it was a little off the cuff, or it was whatever. I already know, generally speaking, from our interactions, your spirit or what you offered to me, and so either way, I'm either way. Yes, I'll push back, but either way, you're in confidence with me as a friend, so I have no problem, and I mean that sincerely. And I have a picture, an image of you as a friend, just like Mark and all of you over there. So that's besides the categorical point as far as, but you're clarifying, and so I'll just say that that assumption of yours is true for you, even though you live now in a country environment, or you used to live in a city environment, which you did, or vice versa for Mark or whatnot. The thing is this: all we have to go on is what we talk about. But the thing is this: you are concluding in your mind things that are happening in my mind. And if I offer you or Mark clarification as to what's actually going on, there's two choices. You take it with honor, as I am speaking truth to you as to what's going on in my mind, or you take it as me trying to, I mean, there's many options, but let's say two, or you take it as me trying to run for shelter or to zigzag around the campfire in order to save some sort of face or this or that. Those are two options. I'm sure there's other options. I am being sincere. Well, two things. There's no way one can escape that you're saying. Bias due to the influence of where you're from, that's impossible to escape. But you can recognize it and correct for it and be honest about it sooner or later. I think that I've been clear about that, and that's why I conceded. But I needed clarification from Mark. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what my thought. But I'm not trying to. You get the point. I'm just
Yep.
trying to be. I'm clarifying because I was truly curious as to how far Mark was pushing this non.
I wasn't pushing anything. It was kind of just an offhand remark
No, but
because it was talking about I was talking about the difference in technology.
no, I know what you were talking. I was here for it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that what I wanted was clarification and to see how far you were. I use the word pushing, but how far you were secure in it, and what was the surrounding points that would enforce that. That's all. It may sound redundant. It may sound like a waste of time, but I don't know. You end up with people thinking simple things about the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the British, the Spanish, the this, the that, and all of a sudden you have a suit. Not you or Mark or whatnot, but all of a sudden you have a world, and there's no choice because people are individuals. You have a world of people thinking stupid stuff en masse, piled up until it's fudgesticles in your head.
But you also can't have a cohesive conversation if you constantly get bogged down in details by going off on side trips.
Yes, you can, in my opinion, because even though it takes, if you're discussing marbles and the production of marbles from a factory and how the machines work. Yes. Is it a casual conversation? No, it's no longer a casual conversation. It's a more involved in conversation. That's the difference in my mind. It's more involved.
Well, but it took us off of the main subject, which was the technology of the time.
Yeah, it
Hmm.
did. But
But that was what that was where the conversation was going, and that was what I was the point I was trying to make, and then we got sidetracked on
but
something else.
I couldn't accept your comment until I had clarity. And I could have shut my trap, which I could have done, and accepted it. But I was so curious to see how much was involved around what you were saying. You produced a book. Steve came at me. We had daggers and spears, and that was
Hmm.
good. I'm happy for it. I have no issues with it, and I'm better for it.
Right.
I truly
And
am better for it.
for clarity, because I couldn't remember, the area covered by the Firefox was Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. I thought Tennessee was involved, but I didn't know about the Carolinas. I wasn't sure.
The
But it's
books.
that area is where they scoured and just talked to older people to get to do these interviews and gather all this information before these people passed away and took the knowledge with them. So
That's awesome.
So I think. Oh, and I was going to say the reason they called it Foxfire, the kids named it, the students named it, and they decided on Foxfire because they thought it was emblematic of the area. Foxfire is their name for a particular type of moss that puts out a very dim phosphorescent glow. And if you go out on moonless nights, it's more evident because it's darker, obviously. If you go out at the right time, you'll see a real faint glow off in the woods, and that's foxfire. It's not bright enough for you to see color, but it is bright enough for you to see movement out in the woods, so you can see if a deer is out there or a rabbit or whatever. And that's
So
what they did after because they said it's just emblematic of the area.
so Kind of keeping in line with this, I'm going to throw in a Florida story.
Okay.
But it's an actual interaction between me and another person.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, I had the occasion. It was a bit more of a somber situation, but I ended up traveling to the Everglades,
Mm-hmm.
um, to a reunion, and there was this old gentleman there, older gentleman, and he's an old Floridian,
Mm-hmm.
non-Hispanic. Who knows how many generations he's been here? In the minority at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been here all my life, and I know the scent of the pine trees with the water
Mm-hmm.
as the sun comes out, the breeze, the way it blows, the feeling, the environment
Mm-hmm.
in my time. But this gentleman has years on me and lived here all his life and also has those notions embedded in him, but with more time in his shoes, let's say. And even though I knew what, when he said what he said, I answered with, really? Because, and I'll tell you what it is that he said, but I'm doing it this way because so that I don't have to backtrack later.
Mm-hmm.
Because I grew up with the technologies that allowed me not to deal with what he told me just prior.
Yeah.
But I've lived enough to remember the situation. It's not like you. So here's what he said. We were talking, and he said to me, and in Florida, and I know across the country, there's this style of window, which is called a jealousy window.
Jealousy. Yeah.
Okay, so and that's typical of homes everywhere. Well, so me and him are talking, and I don't know this, and that, and he
Mm-hmm.
says to me, because I grew up without air conditioner, we would just crack open the windows and we get that breeze, and that's how we lived for X amount of time. And I said, really? Yeah, that's how we used to do it. But I knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but the comment was valuable in how many ways I could say. Sometimes when you are reinforced a concept or you're reminded of the history, no matter how many times you watch a certain movie you like a lot that you hold dear, or read a book probably that you enjoy, or retouch a theme, there's an endearing, reinforcing, something special, a passing on continuation of something that came before. And
Mm-hmm.
he gave the impression of a Florida from a time long gone now
Mm-hmm.
that he grew up in
Sure.
that was very special. But I said, really? And to be honest with you, we live in the age of technology. So it's true,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that Steve says. But I think we're all influenced by our station currently where we're at now. But I just thought I should throw that in because even though it's still a thing, a more recent interaction than what you have been talking about, there's an old Florida that has disappeared as well. Um, and all that's left of that is
Mm-hmm.
left in books that
And there's,
time
yeah,
wrote.
uh, there's an old America that has basically been long forgotten.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of it out of convenience because we don't have to worry about that anymore. Jim's over here riffing on talking about Tennessee and South Carolina, going, "Oh, where the family trees have no branches." Sounds like he's talking about Saskatchewan and Alberta to me. I don't know.
I can no
Where
longer
the gene pool needs chlorine. Yeah, it sounds like Alberta and Saskatchewan to me.
I can no
Um,
longer,
but,
unless it's a very outrageous
mm-hmm,
situation of that inner
mm-hmm,
that you're talking about.
mm-hmm,
I can no longer subscribe for various reasons, but I can no longer subscribe to the. And I know that Jim is saying that as
it's a joke.
again,
Yeah.
again. Let me be clear, because every time I delve into anything, it seems like, well, I'm asking for it. So to be fair, I'm asking for it. So I'll accept that. But I can't help be who I am, and I'm not being malicious or trying to what do you call it? Not assassinate. What's the word, Mark? When you ambush. I'm not trying to but it feels like that. I can see somewhat through other people's eyes, somewhat, but I'm trying to sort of dig through the thing, and maybe I'm an impossible person. Okay, but I can no longer subscribe. I can no longer subscribe to those leaps of assumptions on people.
Mhm.
Un- Unfortunately, or fortunately, and I would say it's more fortunate than unfortunate, because the unfortunate part is you can't get the, in my case, the dig can't happen on the account of other people, because we're too damn closely interlinked in an incredibly crazy way. And on a personal note, just a hundred and some odd years ago, um, I had family members that kept it in the. I mean, you're talking about Europe, and you're talking about small villages, and frankly, I think that if we all poke around a little bit, we could. Unless, like Mark has been in the U.S. his generationally
My
ancestors,
whole life.
and so you have, well, no, generationally,
I
so
know.
you have branches
Hmm.
that could have diverged in whatnot, in ways
Oh
that,
boy, did they ever.
well, but see, and that's helpful because that makes it better. It's better than, because you can end up
Let,
with a situation.
let's just say my ancestors were busy. All right.
It's better that way because
They were subsistence farmers for the most part, and they spent a let's just say they spent a lot of time plowing. Okay.
but yeah, not to take away from the gym. I just wanted to
Yeah.
throw that nugget out there. We don't Today, these things are outrageous,
Mm.
and I know Jim knows this, but back in the day, I mean, if your whole village is wiped out because of some sort of freaking disease, and there
Yeah.
comes third cousin Elba tossing around, shimmying to the left and shimmying to the right,
Mm.
and the only one left there is a donkey and the village priest. Well,
Yeah. Well,
if that's
but
not graphic enough,
but you were talking about how uh, he was telling you about a Florida that had gone that it from back in the day, a
yeah.
Florida that had been lost.
Hmm.
My grandparents had those jealousy windows. You go over to my grandparents' house, their back window that looks out on the back half of their lot in the dining room is a big glazed panel, and on both sides of it is jealousies up both sides. And they never had air conditioning. So I can remember those jealousies being open. And then all the way across the other side of the house, the front door was open and a screen door was there. And there was a big fan right next to that jealousy window because they had a huge covered back porch. And so the cool air from the shade was blown into the house from that fan, and the
Yeah.
heat was blown out the front door. I know exactly what the guy's talking about because my grandfather passed away in 90. We were in Hawaii, so it was 95 or 96. He passed away. My uncle put central heat and air in that house for my grandmother. And that's the first time she'd had central heat or air. And she was in her 80s. So,
Yeah, well, look, there's also, we live we were born in the 20th century, and
mhm.
there's so much to be appreciative of, all the goodies
Yeah.
that we had. And yes, absolutely, you guys are right. Times gone by, boy, not shy 100 and some odd years ago, it was freaking, there was a lot of things that had to be um just dealt with,
Hmm.
or not considered at all. Um, but
But,
then we also have a situation in the United States that we call the frontier situation, which doubles down on this. I mean, it doubles
Mhm.
down on the fact that resources and whatnot, and the dangers from across the way. So
Sure.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and something that a lot of people don't think about is when, like, say, on the wagon trains, the migration from Missouri out to the Oregon Territory, when you left Missouri, you left the United States.
yeah,
You were no longer under the protection of the Constitution. There was no law out there. The only law that was there was if a town decided to elect a sheriff, that was it. But outside of that town, he didn't have any right. He didn't have any power. He didn't have any authority. You know, it was a lawless area. So when you left the United States. And
I saw all the spaghetti westerns, so I'm up to speed. I'm up to speed on exactly what happened.
well,
I saw most of the early Bonanza episodes,
mhm.
so I know exactly how the West was.
Well, it was, yeah. Um, there have been several books written about it and written about my cousins, and that's where I got that story about the house. And Linda corrected me. When Charles was alive, the women, to feed the men, they had to go outside of their house and come out on the front porch and then go in and set the table. They cut a doorway from the kitchen straight to the dining room after Charles died. But still, all the men lived in this house and this side of the house, and all the women lived on that side of the house. It was a weird situation. But yeah, but you don't have to go that far back to find so many things that we have lost, like
Yeah.
the jealousy window kind of thing. Yeah, I'm hearing an echo too. Is that coming in through your speakers?
Let me move the microphone slightly,
Let
and you
me
tell.
see if that's better. I still hear it.
Can you hear me echoing?
No, I don't hear you echoing. I hear me
Okay,
echoing.
I don't hear you echoing.
Okay.
Um,
Um,
I was gonna say that I'm gonna throw out a couple of what do you call? Wait, let me fix my cameras. I'm gonna throw out a couple of, what do you call it when you I don't want to call it complaints, but yeah, okay, let's call it complaints. That's not the word I wanted to.
Observations.
No, it's more leaning towards complaints. They are observations,
Mhm.
but it's more like whatever, something within that. But there's a good word, better word for. But okay, so talking about these things concerning American history that was kicked off with that um tugboat, no,
The steamship, the steamboat. Yeah.
steamboat, which really was a fantastic. I mean that, and the fact that it was just everything, and then the cliff, the stamp on it, which was that a museum came about from it. Um, and then we had the discussion about the laundry and whatnot, but which to me was useful because we went and
Okay.
Steve got a couple of digs at me, and that was good. Um, see, I won't leave well enough alone. Mark is
Let
echoing.
it
Steve,
go.
are
Let
you
it
still
go.
are
I
you
don't know.
still
Am I
echoing?
still echoing? Let me back away from my mic. Is that better?
I can't hear a single echo from you personally.
Hmm.
Okay, no. Jim said no. Okay, so here's a couple of things. Linda says no. Um, so no echo. I think that those four.
Well, I'm not talking, so there
Steve
wouldn't be
said
an
no.
echo.
Oh, wait a second, you're right. So well, he's not. So as long as you don't say anything, everybody's gonna say no. Um, see, we because you know what? We're investigative journal. We're
One of us
2024.
is.
We're better than the mainstream. Okay. So a couple of my critiques and stuff is that I had to go digging out of my sheer curiosity due to my personal stubbornness in digging and digging. And then I discovered a year or so back, whenever we talked about it, that the involvement of Spanish people in the United States, be it through wars and this and that. But growing up, other than since I'm from Florida, knowing about in school, knowing about what do you call this up there by Jackson, St. Augustine. Other than like that those, and I guess school is like that. It's a cliff note, roughly more or less of the history, but there were people involved in the American Revolution that were Spanish.
Mhm.
There were people involved in the War of 1812 that were here generationally that were Spanish. There were people involved in the Civil War with that ancestry or heritage or whatnot. I'm not claiming that that I can link myself to, but that's not the point. The point is that that none of that is really. It's sort of like a side dish if you go looking for it. Um, and the reason I bring this up is because it's never talked about, but and we have talked about it, you and I, together. And you did express that. Well, hell, that's not. It should be something like you were slightly not appreciative of that. It hasn't been explained as part of history. You were very clear on that. But I ran across a video not too long ago, maybe yesterday or the day before, and it's an American guy from Wisconsin that transplanted his butt over to Spain. And he does vlogging and this and that or whatever.
Mhm.
And in one vlog, he goes over to the Canary Islands and he visits a courtyard where, in that courtyard, were places where Christopher Columbus stayed before kicking off to America.
Mhm.
Before it was like he kicked off from there, because that was closer. And um, a lot of the people that were in the Canary Islands were shipped over to Louisiana,
Mhm.
to Florida, that basically became the people that were involved in these scenarios in American history when the United States found independence and such. The country overtook wherever they were living due to selling of the what do you call it, the something purchase, the Louisiana Purchase, and like they were just there, and then the country just evolved around them, and they just continued on with their lives and stuff. And but that's not mainstream understood
No.
excessively across the United States. The only concept is a narrative that involves one ethnicity, one way of thinking, one background history, and every other person is not involved in said. Now, I'm not asking this for myself, although since I'm studying the thing, I'm saying why. But there's people in, anyways, long story short, there's people in Louisiana that have been there since the frickin' before the country was formed,
Mhm.
ancestrally. They still speak Spanish. They fought in every, their ancestors fought in every, the roll calls are the are online. They fought in every war since the Revolutionary War, and they're not even known about. Uh, it's an incredible thing. Why?
I can't explain it.
Yeah.
I can't explain it to you. You know, I had not, and you know this because you and I talked about this, and I think you, I don't know, I think you thought it was kind of odd that I was so pissed off that I hadn't heard about it
No, I
and that
didn't
I
find it
never
odd.
knew it.
No, I didn't find it odd. I
Well,
thought
that I
that
was so pissed off about it because it did make me mad. You know, Steve says the history as taught when we were growing up helped push that we are Americans. That is true. We were taught differently back then. We were taught independence, self reliance, a certain amount of pride, but also you had to rely on yourself. You had to do it. And that we were challenged to succeed. And that, yeah, I can hear the echo again too.
You see, I'm not from my vantage, but is it real bad?
It's a distraction, but that gave us our self-esteem. There's there's not a bigger self-esteem boost than succeeding. With the shift to self-esteem being number one, we've taken away that sense of independence. We've taken away discipline. We've taken away self-reliance, because what about the kids who can't? And I think everybody is suffering for it. We were
Can
taught
you
a lot of factual inaccuracies,
wait
and a
before
lot of
you
things were left out.
clear that up for me in another way so I understand? Can you say it in a basically what you said, but can you clear it up slightly? You're saying because we were taught. You said that we were
We were
taught.
taught independence, we were
Okay,
taught discipline, we were taught self-reliance. And when we discovered that we could do it ourselves, that brought our self-esteem up. That gave us a sense of pride. When you're taught to just have pride, but you're not taught independence,
got you.
self-reliance, you're
I
not
see.
taught to succeed, you're not taught to try, and that there's gratification in succeeding. When you bring when when you stop making kids climb a rope in gym class because some kids can't get to the top of that rope,
Scary.
you but you punish everybody,
Well, yeah.
because not every kid is going to be able to climb that rope. That's part of life.
And how do you connect that to the overarching?
I connect that to the overarching in that, by teaching the kid to try. Maybe you didn't get all the way to the top of that rope, but look at you, you're 6 feet off. You're
That was some
6 feet off
scary.
the ground.
That was as a side note.
Hmm.
You did that. I did that. And let me tell you something. Our gym had a roof that had no end.
Hmm.
And I would go up, but when I would reach just about the top, I forget if I don't think that I don't know how far. I can't remember now, but I know that I was so damn high up that when I looked down for a moment, I said, "Holy, how the hell am I gonna get?" And I was a little kid,
Hmm. But when
so
you came down, how did you feel?
I'm glad that I made that. I'm glad I didn't fall.
Exactly. Exactly. You had a sense of accomplishment.
Today
Whether
they would put a helmet on you and elbow pads.
Today they wouldn't have the rope.
Yeah,
Today
they'd
they
have a
wouldn't have the
virtual.
rope.
But so
Because somebody would get upset if someone got hurt, which naturally, yeah, somebody could get hurt. But they wouldn't want to embarrass the kids who can't climb the rope. If you get a medal just for showing up, what's your incentive to do better? What's your incentive to push yourself to be better? You have none. I got the medal. I
participation.
showed up. Yeah. We give everybody a medal because we didn't want the people who didn't win to feel left out. Well, okay, fine. But what that does is that brings everybody down to mediocrity. There's no
Some
self-reliance, there's no pride, there's no sense of accomplishment, and there's no independence. I mean, you and I growing up, and Steve and Linda and Jim, we couldn't wait to be independent. We couldn't wait to be independent. We wanted that driver's license because we didn't want to ride a bike anymore. We didn't want to be limited to this one little neighborhood. We wanted to go 10 miles down the road instead of 5.
that is absolutely true, but there's something to be said though within that.
Hmm.
In the broadly Hispanic culture, but like in Cuban world, even though that becomes more and more common, but honestly, All that's true, except that the idea of then springing out away from the nucleus of the family is not incentivized necessarily. Like,
Well,
I
it
don't.
it it isn't incentivized. It wasn't incentivized in my family either.
Okay,
We weren't trying to run away from our families, but we by the time you're an adult, you're supposed to be able to provide for yourself.
well, yeah, that part, yeah, but
So that's that independence, you know. You didn't rely on mom and dad to pay for your school. If they were in a position to where they could help you, they would help you. But you worked sometimes two jobs to pay your own tuition to be able to go to school,
the
you know.
conditions, Mark, also, to be fair, to for the sake of being fair, and you know this, I
Hmm.
would assume that you agree with it, but let me not assume and make a fool out of you and me. Is that the
Well,
same?
make
Make
the
an
point.
oh,
Let's
it's
see.
another word.
Make the point and let's see.
Okay, the world that we inhabited
Hmm.
and the conditions that were available to us,
Hmm.
common or accepted as a no-brainer, are not the conditions young people in today's world exist in.
Right. And the conditions that we grew up in are not the conditions that our parents grew up in, or their parents grew up in, or their parents grew up in.
But are
I'm not
you?
saying they're equal. I'm saying that everybody faces those challenges and you're going to face those challenges for the rest of your life. You can't use that as an excuse.
No,
You
but
you have if when you come upon an obstacle, you have to work through it. And what the point that I'm trying to get at is, and this is true for everybody walking the face of the earth, the biggest obstacle you're going to come come up against in your life is going to be yourself,
well,
because it's
granted, but the decision making on the options
mhm,
accessible, it's different
it is
today
different.
than it would have been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's different,
You're right.
so that if a person, like, let's give the person today their just due and
No, I don't
assume.
blame them. I don't blame them because
No,
they're
but
the
let me say,
innocent people that are growing up and being taught. I don't blame them.
no, but let me justify my little claim here, and which is just pushing out
Hmm.
there to see what is said. I'm not
Okay,
forking
well,
myself
get to it.
into the side of the thing, but so people today, considering them viably as intelligent and capable,
Hmm.
um, all things being equal, but things aren't as they were. So a person today, intelligent or whatever, would see the landscape and say, "That's not a prop. That's not that may be available." But that's gonna go against the tides for me, considering all the obstacles, this and that, compared to, in other words, the conditions have not been maintained, and I know there never are, but I can't put all the blame, now thinking about it for a while now, on just something to do with them today. I think it has to do wide, society wide,
Yes,
um,
yes.
complacencies
I
and
don't blame the kids. Like I said, I don't blame the kids. I don't blame the current generation. I blame the people who have taught them or who haven't taught them. I don't blame them. They're the innocents. They only know what they've been taught. So if they don't know something, how can I blame them? I'm blaming, like I said, they're not being taught independence. They're not being taught self reliance. They're not being pushed to succeed. They're not being pushed to do better. They're being told that it's okay. And you don't have to be independent because the community is going to be there to take care of you. And that's the wrong message, in my opinion. And I think COVID was proof of that because the community just wasn't there. Nobody could be anywhere. So I don't blame the kids for that because they just weren't taught it. And you don't know what you don't know. And no, things aren't the same. Uh, Things are very different. Prices are up, but it's really hard. I mean, look at when I was trying to buy a car, a brand new car you could buy for $3,000, brand new, 3,000 bucks. But when you're making 90 cents an hour, it might as well be 3 million because I couldn't wrap my head around $1,000, let alone 3,000.
I bought a Mustang
Mhm.
used, the little 1980s style that had like a hatchback type deal,
Mhm.
for like, if I recall well, it was like either $600 or $800, something like that. It was used,
Yeah.
and all things considered, well, it was a lot of money back, but all things considered, looking back at it, and I can't, I'd have to adjust for, but it was like a steal, um, because it's a freaking Mustang, and you get it for and the thing lasted for some reason.
Mhm.
It lasted,
Yep.
but if you adjust it for today, it's like, which arm do you want first? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like,
I made
so.
the I made the last two payments on a little 1971 Dodge Colt that my parents had. And those payments were $65 a month. And the things that I had to do to get that $65 a month because I wanted a car so bad. I didn't care what it was. It was baby blue four door, little four cylinder and four speed manual transmission, but it was a car. And I made those two payments and they signed the title over to me. But I worked part time for a dry cleaner. I was a bus boy. I worked for at a donut shop all at the same time, plus went to school full time. I busted my ass to get that $65 for 2 months, made those last two payments, and then they signed the title over and I had a car. When it died and I couldn't afford to get it fixed, I bought a 1970 Ford Maverick from some friends of my mom and dad, and I paid $200 for it. And it took me 4 months to pay that off. 4 months to pay off $200. But I did it.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to say that, well, prices were so much cheaper. Yeah, but we were earning so much less. When I started making $1 an hour, I thought I hit the big time.
Yeah, but there's it's not equivalent.
No, it's not equivalent.
It's not equivalent to today, because the income is not matching the expenditures on the other end in a very grotesque way.
You're
I'm not
right.
suggesting I'm not suggesting a solution, or this or that. I'm just saying what it seems like. Um, so options are limited for people, um, and that's not conducive to. I don't know. The 20th century was freaking awesome. But wait
Dude,
a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. In my case, and many Americans' cases, but not
dude,
for everybody.
you're talking to a guy who didn't buy his first home, who couldn't afford to buy his first home until he was 45 years old. I've talked to several 20-year-olds or people in their 20s, and they're like, we'll never be able to afford a house. When I was in my 20s, I thought the same thing. I didn't buy my first house until I was 45. This is the second house I've owned. So it's not just a this generation problem, but we were taught to look ahead and not worry, not project, fear and doubt, but to work our butts off to make it happen.
It seems that that reality that that we, broadly speaking, operated under,
Hmm.
the assumptions that we leaped to because they were always roughly true,
Hmm.
that pre-internet world,
Hmm.
that pre 9/11 world, that pre-pandemic world, that pre this era world is a true, in my mind, divider line between the old world and the new, just like Europeans traveling to the United to America. To
Hmm.
me, there's a definite
Yeah,
step across a certain boundary of reality. The
I agree.
realities, yeah, there's a lot of
It,
shenanigans when it comes to what filters into the head of people
hmm.
based
I
on,
agree there.
yeah, well, yeah, based on, there's a lot of good too, but um there's a lot of chasing one's tail around, um or accepting certain things. It's a weird, the internet is pros and cons, and I think it does influence because people get a picture of the world, um
Well,
that's I let me just say this one last thing in terms of what this thing, and see what you have to say. I feel that I've benefited from reading and whatnot, and studying different things at my, whatever my whim is.
hmm.
I feel that, especially with the news, that the pictures that are painted are manipulative, dude. I really do. I feel that it's just enough to stack upon, to create an image in a person's head, to blame one group, to blame another group. I see that, and
It's
one thing is a historical view, one thing is a, you know challenging academic fisticuff, um do but another thing is to not recognize, whoa, let's not go off the frickin' jump off the balcony here over the X, Y, and Z. I mean, I can see how people can jump to conclusion and then victimhood, and I can see that, and I understand, but I think that there's pros and cons. It's a very
well,
weird scenario we live in
but
today.
I don't remember ever seeing the level of helplessness and hopelessness a lot of young people have today, in that they think they're automatically failures because they didn't grab the brass ring on the first attempt, when nobody grabs the first ring of the brass ring on the first attempt. When we only see the successes and we never see the 32 failures before that success, it's real easy to feel inadequate. It's real easy to feel that you're not accomplishing anything. And it's real easy to feel like a failure when all you're seeing is the beautiful people having the beautiful life on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever. When you're not taught to be independent and to be self reliant and to have a goal to work towards and to strive to succeed, when you're not taught those things,
Let me inject what you
but
just
you,
said, because you
but
gave
you,
an.
hold
Go
on
ahead.
just one second,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
but you see other people have all this and I don't have that. You do feel inadequate. You do feel like a failure. I don't remember us having that.
You said something with people seeing on the internet or on Instagram and stuff. I just wanted, because this is the image that, if you think, okay, if you think back in the day, for us to have an exposure to other people's lifestyles in terms
Mhm.
of like, oh, they're having a ball and this and that, it was either TV in that concept, or you heard about something on the radio. There's a party at the beach today, or something like that, but you didn't get a front row seat with someone holding a camera
Mhm.
and showing you the party, so that
No.
vicariously you are living everything. So, anyways, long story short, That's the image that I pictured, and that's weird.
Well, the only way you saw that was you had to seek it out. You had Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I'm Robin Leach with a voice so annoying even dogs 2 blocks away
Right.
can't stand me.
That's a
You had to search for that.
that's a big difference from
Mhm.
yesteryear to today in terms of if you
Right.
can. So I don't. You have to do it just like I do. Obviously, you do because we talk about it all the time. But I'm not going to speak for you. Um, I travel the world just sitting at my computer. If I
Hmm.
had that option when since I was a little kid,
Hmm.
how many things wouldn't I go out and do as a little kid?
Well, but no, but even but that's a side issue to at least teaching a kid. Jim Dockrell says it here. It's not a failure. It's learning that a method. It's learning a method that doesn't work. You only fail if you give up. See, that's our generation of education in that statement because that's what we were taught. You only fail if you give up. That's not being taught now. That's my broader point. We were taught self-respect number 1, self-reliance number 2, independence number 3, a sense of pride, whether we're Canadian or American. And we were taught to try and don't give up. You're not going to be able to run a 4-minute mile. Probably not. That's a world class athlete, but you don't have to run a 4-minute mile. We're going to start you out right now. We're going to see, can you run a mile?
Well, these kids have parents, and those parents are the ones like my parent. I was left to my own devices generally, but I was taught
Mm-hmm.
lessons along the way, and I have my own world sort of understanding that may be similar to yours in many ways or
Mm-hmm.
different in certain ways. It's up to the parents and such and this and that, and it's only a forwarding of. So we have if the kids should not be blamed. However, they are responsible because they're human beings as well. But it's a generational thing. But it's not even a generational thing because if the conditions aren't aren't met for a stable world for a country or whatnot for people to navigate around, and shortcuts
And
are taken by the people that run things.
and and that's why I don't blame the kids, because you're talking about those conditions. Who set up those conditions? We did. That's why I'm not blaming the kids. The kids didn't set this up. The kids didn't pick their education system. The kids go to school to learn. They're not even taught how to handwrite, you know?
And we're not at the helm. People, okay,
No,
so
you and I aren't at the helm, no.
no, no,
But
no. I'm saying the public at large, generationally, are at the helm to a degree.
to a
But
to
the
agree
other,
to the degree that they want to be.
but to the degree that they are, the rest of the mile that they have to leap, there's a structure built that's called top down in the
Hmm.
country. And if everybody doesn't meet those qualifications, um, certain things start to go in the
Hmm.
directions they do.
Right.
So it's not
But
just the citizenry.
no, 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 no. No, I agree with you there. No, it's not. And in fact, you'll see in a lot of places the citizenry is starting to stand up and say, no, we're
Yeah.
tired of this. No, no, you're not going to teach my kid that. You're going to teach him this. And if you won't do it, I'm going to run for a seat on the school board and I'm going to fire you. And you're starting to see that more and more often. Um, why is tuition so expensive? Because we let it be. Because we let it be so expensive. You know, go price a textbook in a college bookstore. Just pick any book and just look at the price of it. You'll see three, four, $500 books in those in those schools. It's absolutely asinine. It's a racket. School textbooks are a racket. You know, um, you look up the same book on Amazon and it's 14.50. The reason tuition is so expensive is because we allow it to be. You start telling colleges, no, I'm not paying that. He's going to go to a trade school. He's going to learn to be a heavy equipment mechanic and make decent money without your 4-year degree. You know, there are people, I'm serious, there are people leaving the Caterpillar program, becoming Caterpillar certified technicians that are walking out of school and into $80,000 a year positions because there are Caterpillar distributors all over the country that are begging for certified techs.
I majored in Japanese, 18th century Japanese origami.
Oh, did you? Because
No,
I
I'm kidding.
majored in 17th century Javanese goat herd poets. Meh.
No, but there are okay. So there are. I'm joked about that, but there are people that I'm not trying to suggest. There's people that for some reason become or are interested in some weird thing that the majority of the, and I get that. So I'm not trying to, but there's a little bit
Excuse me.
of an irony somewhere in there.
You know, if you're going to go be an engineer, obviously you need that degree. If you're going to go be a doctor, you have to have a doctorate. If you're going to be a lawyer, you got to go to law school. I agree with all of that 100%. But there's no way you can sit there and tell me that everybody going to every college and every college in the United States is trying to be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or something along those lines. They're not. Look at some of the majors. You know, hell, the guy running the drive through at Burger King's got a degree. You know, it's to me, and it's not the kid's fault. There's been two generations that have been shoved into believing that that 4-year degree is going to get them a good job, and then they get out of school with $100,000 of debt and say, where's the job everybody said we were going to get? You know, we gotta, we're doing it to our kids and we gotta stop it.
I think that I had a, the tragedies of life aside for a second. I think that I had a very blessed in my mind, in I believe humbly,
Mm-hmm.
um, life in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the strange position of growing up, being born in the era that I was, from people that had an experience that occurred to them that I didn't deal with,
Mm-hmm.
and growing up in this world, this American world, and the emphasis that was propagated through the culture at
Mm-hmm.
the time, the understanding of what America was, even though it's still a pop, because think there you can't get more pop than like Rambo and freaking
Yeah,
Sylvester Stallone and
sure.
this and that, whatever Commando or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You can't get more pop than that. But fine. But it was a positive that fed back into, well, hell yeah, we're
Mm-hmm.
American
Yeah.
and kicking it. Now, I understand that, hey, that you could go overboard and all of a sudden you have little
Well,
Rambos
yeah.
everywhere. Think, okay, but
Nobody's talking about that, but
any average normal kid growing up at the time,
mm-hmm.
it did give a sense of pride,
Mm-hmm.
a significant sense of pride. It gave, and there was certain stabilities, but our parents had to deal with a whole bunch of nonsense anyhow, because that's
Yeah.
what you were saying earlier, that it's a generational, adapting and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm missing the forest for the trees. Maybe it's what you're saying, or somewhere in between. I don't know, but maybe due to my station, I'm not understanding what kids are taking in. Maybe they are seeing something similar that I saw when growing up, and I just can't see it now because I'm an adult
Mm-hmm.
and see all the cracks, you know, in the structure. Let's say.
Well, yeah, and we do have a level of cynicism that they don't have, because when I was 19, 20 years old, it was a big, bright, beautiful world, and I was ageless. I was going to live forever. or so I thought. I was bulletproof and I knew it all. I just had to get out of my way and let me go do it. I never did it, but I wanted him out of my way so I could. That's what I mean. The biggest roadblock is always going to be yourself. But think about when we were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? You would hear things like, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fireman, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor. Oh, I
You
want to
wanted to
drive a
be
crane. I
you
want to
you
do,
want you wanted to be a newscaster or a radio at one point. Then you wanted to be a
yeah.
writer.
Well, that was it when I was like 19, 20. But when I was a kid, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really didn't.
On
Part
the
of me
other
wanted
hand,
to build, part of me wanted to build cars, part of me wanted to fly airplanes.
while you wanted to be those things,
Hmm.
I wanted to be either one of the Beatles, Jimi
Hmm.
Hendrix,
Hmm.
Eric Clapton. Those are the ones that I want. That in
Hmm.
my mind, that was my that was the diamond.
But you notice neither one of us said I want to be a video game developer. Neither one of us said I want to get a poli sci major. Neither one of us said any of that. We had specific things that we wanted to do.
I liked Indiana Jones. I wanted to be.
Well, yeah, an archaeologist, but that's cool. I mean, come on, face it, archaeology is cool.
But
but you see what I'm getting at? Some of those required a certain level of specialized study, but a lot of them didn't. There is absolutely zero shame in being an electrician. There is zero shame in being a HVAC guy.
I don't know that there is now.
Well, it's seen as, oh, that's manual
Is
labor. That's beneath. Yes.
is it?
Yes, we got to have an office job. We have to have an office job making over 100,000 a year so I can have my Lambo. Well, you're
I've never.
probably never going to own a Lambo, and you're probably never going to make over 100,000 a year because a
Yeah, but that
very small percentage of the population does.
but that's a leftover yuppie thing from the 80s slash whatever. Because I've never thought of it as something serious.
Talk to high school age kids.
Really?
Talk to high school and college age kids. Yes, they all firmly believe that they're going to get out of college and make over 100,000 a year.
Really?
Yeah, and very few actually go on to do it. You know.
I'm not exposed to. I guess. Look, I guess I'll end it on my end and whatever
Yeah,
you'd
we
like.
need to land the plane. It's been 2.5 hours. Good grief. We could go. We could do a marathon, and we might.
But I'll end it with this as a, what do you call it? Something leaf. Peace leaf. A piece of
Olive leaf, olive branch.
olive branch. Yeah. But
Hmm.
I'm taking all the olives.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's
You get the branch. You get the branch.
typical.
No, over to Steve, primarily since he hasn't had the back and forth. Although if he's even still around, um, I think that the emphasis, or to re-emphasize
Mhm.
the idea of something to do with humility very directly, but um, much to do, well, definitely humility, but much to do with the self-recognizing, which I think I try to do, but no matter how much I try to do, it's always there. The concept of one's biased perception paradigm always being at play,
Mm.
um, and having to if one's interested in trying to navigate that, I think it saturates everything because we can't escape being who we can't escape the bodies and minds
Mhm.
and the collection of things that have been adding up for decades and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
I have learned a little bit of the concept of humility when it comes to that, and trying to back away and re but sometimes it takes longer than other times.
Hmm.
um and even after the fact, Mark, I think that it's such a maze, and because it's such a complication, um we can never be free to see, in my opinion, perfectly what calling what something is without extra noise involved in it. Um, and so one of the things that, as of late, for the past couple of years, I've been working with this idea of humility and that word that I just forgot. When one that the trappings that one might go through, and I think that that's an important thing.
Introspection, kind of
Introspection,
self-awareness.
self-awareness, to try by saying trying does not mean by any stretch
Do
success.
or do not. There is no try.
It means exactly that. It's somewhere hanging there. um I think it's very important. It has been helpful for me for clarity, but I always realize that there's another trapping. So for instance, last thing I'll say, your commentary, um Steve's commentary over the question that I pushed, um, my takeaway, and it could be anything, but just the principle of this, please, it's the principle, not the other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is that I truly feel that both of your points of view, and you're the one that actually specifically, because we were obviously more involved, are completely valid. And my point of view is another instance, and it sits on a plate of many directions one can go to over one subject, but unless you take other people's concepts into account, you're not quite that much clearer. You need I need to accept the other accounts over a given issue or that, in order to, and I think that I play with that. I've been playing with that, and I think it's very important. Some people might fart it out their butt, but but the point is that
Well, I
I
have
think that
two
that's
articles. I have two articles about doing laundry in the 1800s pulled up for you for when we're finished.
but
Mhm.
you say this, you sent me well, actually, let's be fair. In what area people doing laundry in the 18th century
Let's
in?
not let's not get into that right now. Let's do this afterwards. We got to land the plane.
Okay, but you see where okay, but yes, you know that when you sent me your direct fathers,
Hmm.
it took me a while, but I sat with it because I was interested. It's not like you were pushing me. You said, well, here it is if you want to read it and stuff. It took
Yeah.
me a while, but we sat one day and talked about it. So the concept of sooner or later you have to face, you know, am I discarding information, or am I introducing
Hmm.
it and understanding it? And it was enjoyable, by the way. So yes, I'm,
Hmm.
I'm totally open.
There's certain things you have to set aside because you can't make the connection now. So let's set it aside. We're not
Right,
throwing it away. We're just setting it over here.
right.
Hmm.
So I'm totally open. So to be fair, I
Yep.
hope that you would know that. Although sometimes some things take longer than others. But
Hmm.
any final thoughts before we close the shop?
Just one. I wanted to do something here. Jim Dockwell said we had a young guy here last year. I'm assuming they run a bed and breakfast. So I'm assuming he was somebody that was visiting, that just finished his diesel mechanic certification, had 4 new job offers before the paperwork came in, plus the job that he already had. Now, I know that's anecdotal, but I have talked to so many people who are in the same position that they decided that college was not for them. They didn't want to spend however many thousand a year for tuition. They would rather invest that money in a trade school and learn a marketable trade that people actually want. And that's the key right there to success, is develop the knowledge and the skills that people are willing to pay you for. That's it right there in a nutshell. And then I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, I think that was well said, and we will close the shop. So this is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. None of the views expressed by our sponsor is held by me, just so that you know. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast here at the Trampled Underfoot podcast show on YouTube. We have a site over on Facebook by the same name, as well as a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. And we're sponsored by.
Harneal Media. Our buddy Steve, you know him, you love him. He's in the chat here all the time, feeding me links and occasionally yanking Eloy's chain. Look, it's just you and me here, hanging over the back fence with a cup of coffee in our hands. Let's talk a little bit. You want a website? You don't think you want a website? You want a website? Why? I'll tell you why. Because you have a product or service to put out to the public. How are you going to do that? Yeah, you can do TikTok videos, and yeah, you can post it on Facebook or Instagram or what have you. But who's going to see it? Only your followers. And how many of them do you really have? Well, you need a website. You need a website that's going to actually give you some legitimacy, that's going to let you do some e-commerce, that's going to let you put your products and services out there in front of the masses. You're going to need somebody to help you set up that website. That man is Steve over at Harneal Media. Now, there's a link to Harneal Media in every video on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. It's very competitive priced, and it's 100% personal service. When you're dealing with Harneal Media, you're dealing with Steve, period. That's it. So check him out. Get over to harnealmedia.com, click that contact us link, and send him a message. He'll work with you. He'll work for you. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
All right. All right, guys. So we hope you enjoyed our conversation today. We're always on about something here or there. The story was freaking awesome, and I hope you post the link whenever you can over on our
Yeah,
Facebook page
I've
because
got to
it's a
send it to Jamie, and I'll send a link to this particular article over to our Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page.
yeah. So we hope you enjoyed it. Be safe, do the things you love, and we'll catch you here next week, same channel. See ya.
Pieces, or just one piece. Don't be greedy. Just take one piece.